Welcome to the live stream. I'm Xinhua correspondent Zhao Zehui. Joining us today is Tang Jun. He is the Director of Marketing Management Department of Ilian Group. He will walk us through this photovoltaic base today. We can see rows of solar panels and a lot of vegetation. Now it is quite a view because we're in the middle of a desert. This desert is Kubuqi Desert, the 7th largest desert in China. It stretches across Midwestern Inner Mongolia, running almost parallel to the mighty Yellow River. It had a nickname, but not a fun one. It was called the Sea of Death. But now things have changed. Now the solar panels were put up, pumping that green energy, and the vegetation starts to grow, turning the desert into an oasis. How does this all happen, and what does this mean for China and the rest of the world in terms of reducing carbon footprints? Let's find out. So first of all, could you tell us what this photovoltaic base is and how it is currently doing?
Sure, definitely. It's my pleasure. Our solar farm started in 2014. Initially, it's our desertification control initiative. We're wanting to combat the desertification in a sustainable way. First of all, we're wanting to looking for a way to produce energy that is clean and easy to use for local communities. And then we come up with the idea of solar power because in this part of China, we don't have other resources apart from massive amount of underutilized barren land and rich sunlight access. For example, here in Erdos, we have 1,360,000 hours of sunlight each year, which is a very, very rich natural resources to be utilized. So we came up with this brilliant idea to having solar power as a means to generate electricities, which is a fundamental element for the industrial development of local communities. So that's how the idea been coming out as an initiative.
Okay. What is the scope of this base and how much electricity does it generate?
Yeah, at the moment we have 710 megawatts in terms of the scale, and then each year we produce around 1,250 megawatt hours of electricity to be used by local communities and the local factories.
Okay. So you talk about how this idea of building a solar panel base in the desert came to be.
Yes.
Okay, so how does this solar panel actually help to combat desertification, as you mentioned before?
Sure. This is actually a very interesting story to be shared. Initially, when we started this solar panel operation, we didn't anticipate any environmental effects at all. But gradually, we noticed under the solar panel there are some grass coming out of the desert, and then we realized probably under the panel there are opportunities for eco-farming. And then we started to do a lot of experiments to try if there are any elements can coming out of the desert because of the shading effects provided by solar panel. And then we noticed the licorice and tomatoes can be planted as a way to improve the soil conditions in the desert because the organic matter is being added to the soil from the debris and roots of those crops. So gradually we noticed this is a very beneficial way to utilize the natural land resources, but at the same time to combat the desertification. That's the story.
So you talk about planting licorice.
Yes.
So can you tell me more about this? Like how many years does it take for the licorice to transform the sand into the soil?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Licorice, we call it as a nitrogen factory because it's a very amazing plant. It can absorb and transport fixed nitrogen from the air to the soil, and then that nitrogen acting as a fertilizer to increase the fertility of the soil. And then after 3 to 5 years cultivation of licorice, the soil is actually turned from sand into an organic soil, which is suitable for the plantation of other species such as the tomato and other economic crops. So that's how it works.
Okay. So what plants or what vegetables can you plant nowadays?
At the moment, we have tomatoes, melons, and sunseeds.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about
Licorice, for sure.
potatoes? Potatoes?
Yeah, potatoes. At the moment, we have production of around 500 ton a year. I mean the total area of our solar farm, and then the average production we can reach is around 52.5 ton per hectare, which is a reasonable production in terms of the scale.
Okay, so one is very surprised to see like you can plant so many vegetables in the middle of a desert, and so I see there are some people maybe harvesting some vegetables. Let's go and check it out.
Go and check it out.
Does the solar panel help with the wind?
Yes, definitely. That's another interesting by effects we notice. By putting up those solar panels, we notice the shading effects and the windbreak effects it provided. It's sort of forming a microclimate, which is very suitable for the growing of our crops and other vegetations. At the same time, those vegetation increase the vegetation coverage of the entire area, which help a lot to fix the moving dunes and the sands.
你好，你现在是在挖什么呢？
挖土豆
哦。
挺大个的啊。
So they are digging up the potatoes in the sand. 您是本地人吗？
本地人。
那今年这个收成怎么样？
就是凑合原乡。
So she's from local, and she will have a fairly good harvest this year. So you can see this is the potato growing
from the desert.
Yeah, out of the sand from the desert, which is incredible to see. 这个咱们这边的土豆，你觉得好吃吗？
好吃，那啥地土豆挺好吃的。
那它的口感是怎么样的呀？是比较沙还是比较脆？比较沙。Okay.
挺好的。
She says it tastes actually very good.
It's very soft and easy to chew. And then we can use it to produce other byproducts such as potato chips, which is very favorable, one of the most favorable bites.
So I know that besides planting the vegetables,
yes,
you also raise animals here.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, the reason why we're doing this is initially when we are a desertification control operation aiming to fighting back the desertification and land degradation here in Kubuqi. The reason why we're doing that is we're wanting to find a way to again restoring the desert into a green oasis. And the way to doing that is we're wanting to adding organic matters back to the soil again, which has been lost 100 years ago. The reason for that is because the carbon being absorbed out of the soil by plants, all type of different plants, and then those plants being eaten up by animals by grazing activities, and then gradually it lost the carbon released to the atmosphere or any other form. But gradually, when we're adding back those debris and the animal wastes back to the soil, the organic matters will hugely increase. Those organic matters is a critical part to conserve the soil fertility and also improve its condition to support the agriculture production. So eco-husbandry being utilized as a mean to adding those organic matter back to the soil and try to fighting back the land degradation. That is the motivation of us doing this activities.
So what kind of animals do you raise here?
We raise sheep, chicken, duck, and cow as well. Little cow, not the big one.
So how many sheep are there?
At the moment, we have around 400 to 500, and then from season to season, we will increase the number or reduce the number depending on the carrying capacity of this land.
China declared that it will achieve the carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. And tying all this together, like growing vegetation and raising animal here in the desert, how do you think this will help China to achieve those goals from treating the desertified land?
Sure, definitely. That's a good question. Actually, we can describe our strategy as a push and pull strategy. That means when we're using this solar panel to generate electricity, it's hugely decrease the amount of fossil fuel being burned to be used as an energy source. So by doing that, we've been able to reduce the carbon dioxide emission on the one hand. On the other hand, we've been able to increase the vegetation coverage by growing those crops and other type of vegetation. And then those vegetation from day to day will absorb carbon from the air by photosynthesis process and then restore that carbon into the soil again. So those two hands strategy sort of helping to reduce the carbon dioxide on the one hand and also absorb the existing carbon out of the atmosphere. So that's our two-way strategy.
Okay, so I love the idea of increase the vegetation coverage in the desertified land area. So this is only a fraction of the Kubuqi Desert. Imagine that this is being done in a very large scale, and that carbon sink increase, I think it will be very beneficial to reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. As for the green energy you just mentioned, that's what we're going to explore just in a few moment, and to see like how these solar panels to create such amount of green energy for people to use. So I imagine it's not easy to build such a large base in the middle of a desert. Have you encountered any challenges?
Definitely. Actually, this is in the middle of desert, Kubuqi. The biggest challenge is moving dunes because the sand is constantly moving by the wind. So from day to day, you can encounter a completely different landscape. And in a bad season, the sand dune can be up as 100 meter high, and then that is a very big challenge because having such large scale of operation in terms of solar power, we need to have a completely flat contour. But here, due to the moving sands, the contour can be constantly changing. So that is the biggest challenge we're facing here in Kubuqi.
So how did you manage to overcome this difficult?
Yeah. Initially, we are using a contour engineering strategy, which is trying to flatten the sand dune as much as we can. But we notice it's not a sustainable way because one day after, the contour can be completely different. So we're starting to forestate as much as we can, and then using vegetation as a way to buffer the wind and break the wind to sort of stop the sand from constantly moving. And then that is a way of trying to stabilize the landscape we can achieve here.
So can you tell me what technology goes into these solar panels?
Yeah, definitely. We have multiple generations of solar power generation already, starting from generation 1 on my left hand. But at the moment, we've been able to upgrade that technology into the second generation, which is that side of the road. From generation 1 to generation 2, the huge difference is we've been able to smartly adjust our angle due to the different daytime of the sunlight. And from generation 1, the angle is fixed. We wouldn't be able to reach the maximum capacity of power generating due to the sun direction change. But into the generation 2, those panels are smart enough. They can adjust the angle accordingly to the sunlight direction. So that is the technology improvements we've been able to achieve in last 30 years of operation.
Okay, one thing just came to my mind. Is the sand here cause any trouble to the solar panels?
Oh, that's a constantly challenge, because in the middle, having a large scale of operation in the middle desert, you're constantly moving, facing the moving sands. For example, those solar panels require a high maintenance of operation, such as 3 to 4 times cleaning of those solar panel each year. Otherwise, it will be covered up by the sand, and then the covering up will hugely damage the capacity of electricity production.
Okay. So, you plant vegetables and raise animals here.
Yes.
How do you deal with these operations? Do you have any specific designs or technologies to accommodate this plant and animal?
Yes, we have. Initially, in the generation 1 solar power generation on my left hand side, the space beneath the solar panel is not sufficient to support the large-scale plantation. But when we realized that disadvantage, we've been able to improve our technology to the generation 2, which is on my right-hand side. We've been able to lift up the solar panel to a height that is spatial enough to support the plantation beneath the solar panel. And then we've been able to invent a smart irrigation system accordingly to cater the demand of water irrigation for those plants from day to day.
How does this smart irrigation system actually work?
It's actually worked with three basic elements. One is a monitoring system, which is monitor the moisture of the soil and also the acidity of the soil. And this second element is irrigation elements, which will be able to transport water from our well to different parts of the farm. And then the third part is electricity system, which will be able to produce enough energy to sort of support the pumping of the water from well to the remote part of our farm. So those three elements working as a whole to form a smart eco-farming system beneath and between the solar panels.
Okay. What is the scale of this base?
We're starting our operation from 2014 until so far. We've been able to cover an area of 50 square kilometer with solar farm, and then the total investments we've able to deliver until so far is 5 billion Chinese yuan, and then the annual production of our electricity can reach about 800 million yuan each year. I mean, in terms of the revenue.
So in here we can see some facilities, and I wonder what they are used. Let's go and have a look. 你们现在是在做什么工作？
我们正在做检修这些检查。
So they are doing a maintenance work on this electricity storage unit. 这个东西是干什么用的呢？
我们是储能系统，电池储能的，主要是光伏发出的电，如果厂区白天用不了的话，会存储到我们这个系统里头。晚上光伏发不了电的时候，我们是释放出来。
So this one is used for storing the electricity generated during the day, so that in the evening when there's no sunlight, the stored electricity can be used.
Actually, most of clean energy have an issue of fluctuation. As we know, we depend on the sunlight for the electricity protection, but from day to day, we might have a sunny day, we have a rainy day, we have a day not that good in terms of sunlight. So how we're dealing with that question is we have little battery units here on site to store the supplies of electricity being produced in a sunny day. When the weather is not that good, we've been able to release that stored electricity to the grid again to support the day-to-day use of electricity, to make sure we have a very flat and stable supply of the electricity.
Okay, another question. How does the electricity generated from here actually goes to the whole households in other regions?
Actually, that's a very technical question. From the western part of China, we are very rich in terms of the sunlight, and the annual sunlight hours we have here is more than 3,000. But actually, most of the electricity consumption spot is in the coastal part of China, which is 1,000 miles away. 1,000 kilometers away from here, and transporting the energy from here to that part of China is a huge challenge to us as well, because the transmission process will hugely cost our electricity. So we've been able to produce electricity here and then transport that electricity to the national grid, and then using national grid as an instrument to transfer the electricity to other parts of the country.
Okay. So now we have this a little building. I've noticed that there are many screens in here. Shall we go and check it out?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Have a look. So what we're looking at is the monitoring elements of our solar farm. As you can see here, that's a real-time surveillance camera showing the entire operation of the electricity farm. And as we mentioned earlier, it's covering an area of 50 square kilometer, and this is only a small corner of our operation. And we've been able to see the temperature and the wind speed and also the direction of sunlight, and then adjust our angle of solar panel accordingly to the direction of our sunlight.
So is there any data to show us how the solar panels have helped reduce the carbon dioxide?
Definitely, we have a monitoring system providing real-time data surveillance in terms of the daily production of electricity and also the carbon dioxide we've been able to reduce from that clean energy. So it's just out there. Let's go out to check it out.
All right. Okay, now we can say the daily power output is almost 331,000 kilowatts per hour.
Yes, that's just production of that electricity today, and it's also shown up the total adding value of the electricity being produced this year, which is 174,000 megawatts hours in total.
Okay.
That's annual production.
Yeah, I can also see it saved the standard coal like almost 700,000 tons, and also saved 1,744,000 carbon dioxide.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in total, that amount of the carbon reduction we've been able to calculate is based upon the fossil fuel burning otherwise need to be utilized for the day-to-day electricity use, because energy is the fundamental elements of our industry or agriculture use activities from day to day. If we don't produce clean energy out of this solar panel, we have to produce that energy out of fossil fuel, right? So if we been able to cut down the fossil fuel burning, we've been able to cut down the carbon emission. So that's our story.
So I think the solar panel station is definitely working and is effective in reducing carbon footprints.
Exactly.
But I wonder, is this the end goal here, or do you have any next step plans?
Sure, definitely. As we all know that clean energy have a problem of energy lost in the transmission periods, and then how we're dealing with that question is we're wanting to reach ultimate form of energy, which is hydrogen. So what we're doing at the moment, and also it's become our next plan, is we're utilizing the clean energy produced here in our solar farm to produce hydrogen out of electronify the salty water to produce the hydrogen and the oxygen at the same time. So, as we all know, hydrogen is very, very clean energy, and the burning of hydrogen will produce nothing apart from water, right? And then the water can be reutilized again. So we consider it's the ultimate form of energy, and it has no problem of energy loss in the transmission process.
Okay, so we'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so thank you for watching, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.